In November of 1882, the townspeople of Middleton were shocked by the sad demise of William Lancashire. But it wasn't the death of this poor man that shocked them. It was what would be found in his house upon the discovery of his body. This, my friends, is the strange and bizarre and at times gruesome story of Owd Canky. Directly in front of us is the parish of St Leonard's, and it's here in Middleton where today's strange tale takes place. Now, for everyone that watches the Days of Horror YouTube channel and mine and Vicky's stories, you will by now know that we both love to delve deep and uncover the strange and the bizarre. It's not always crime, and it's not always murder cases. We do like to uncover the strange and bizarre. And today's story is no different, as we delve into the story of a man who was fondly nicknamed as Owd Canky. Now, Owd Canky is a story and it's a tale that has been passed down through the generations ever since, I would say, probably since the death of William Lancashire. And William Lancashire, aka Owd Canky, he was somewhat of a recluse. And I have read many articles that Owd Canky himself may at times have been a bit abrupt with people, kept himself to himself, and basically didn't like anybody prying into his life or into his business. And you'll soon find out, guys, as to why that may be. Now, when he was sadly found lifeless, like I said, in his home, it was when they were obviously going through his possessions, people would uncover valuable items. And it could range from money to jewellery to clothing, perhaps expensive shoes, expensive clothing. Why is this? Why would he have all these expensive valuables? Now, some people will argue and say, well, he's obviously collected them throughout the years, he's got the money. But the problem is, Owd Canky wasn't a wealthy man. He was somewhat of a beggar, of a tramp. He was poor, he lived in squalor. So where did he get all these valuable items from? Where did he get these loose coins from? Where did he get the jewellery especially from? We'll get into that now, guys. Now, Owd Canky, like I said, he was somewhat of a recluse, but he also had a nighttime hobby. And some say that that hobby was body snatching. And he would sit in his lodgings down, and I think it's called Back Lodge Street, which we're going to go to shortly. Now, his premises was at the bottom of that street, which overlooked St Leonard's parish, or St Leonard's church. And he could see the church from where he lived. More importantly, he could see any new interments, any new burials. And the story goes that Owd Canky himself would, at night time, visit the place of that most recent burial. He would dig up the corpse and he would take, like I said, the jewellery or any expensive clothing with him. He would also take some, not all, but some of the bodies. Now, back in the 1800s, when the medical profession was kind of in its infancy, the need for cadavers or dead bodies was extremely high, and the medical profession, rightly or wrongly, would pay people to bring in cadavers. Now, Owd Canky jumped on board with this, and he would soon kind of make up, or he'd become friends with some medical people, and he would dig up these bodies, these recent burials. He would carry them down, which I think is this path, down to what is known as Owd Canky Ginnel. He would then place these bodies onto waiting boats on the River Irk, and then they would obviously sail away and they'd take these bodies into Manchester to perform these medical examinations. But like I said, all this was into the mid to late 1800s, when medical science was still in its infancy. There was a lot of money in grave robbing and body snatching. Now, this is the first time myself and Vicky have been to St Leonard's here in Middleton, and we're really amazed at just how expansive this graveyard is. Hello, doggy. And just how old a lot of these headstones and crypts and mausoleums are. And there's a lot of history here. We've noticed quite a few of the flat headstones dating back to the mid to late 1700s, and especially early 1800s. And the first thing I said to Vicky was, I just wonder how many interesting tales there are in this graveyard. But we're here to tell the story of Owd Canky and why he had so many valuable items in what was somewhat of a squalor that he lived in. So we're going to look for Canky Ginnel, which I think is just down here. But like I said, we've never been to this area before. We've driven past and through Middleton once or twice, but we've never actually visited this graveyard. But I believe Canky Ginnel is down these steps and just down there, and it is somewhere in that area where the home of William Lancashire, aka Owd Canky, once lived. Now, this is the back end of Canky Ginnel, and as you can see, it's a bit of a dumping site. And I know this isn't part of the story itself, but I thought I'd take you guys up here because it does look a little bit ominous. The graffiti all over the walls, and people are arguing behind me. But yeah, you can tell this is being run down somewhat, and I won't tell you what we've just found on the floor to where Vicky's standing, but let's put it this way, a dog didn't leave it behind. But yeah, it's a bit of a dumping ground in this area. But where Vicky stood is the entrance to St Leonard's Parish Church, which obviously takes you up to where Owd Canky himself would visit to steal those bodies from the ground. Now again, as we were saying at the top, if the legends are true, Owd Canky would live somewhere there or here, and he would be watching from his house what was going on at the actual church itself and the burials. And this is Canky Ginnel, and as you can see, the original cobbled stones are still there, the sets, and then they obviously take the left till they get up to the churchyard. But this, my friends, is the synonymous Canky Ginnel. So below us is the River Irk. Now obviously times have changed and it wouldn't have been like this, exactly like this, what, over 100 years ago. But this is the river where Owd Canky himself would have brought those lifeless bodies to waiting, well, little barges, little boats, and he would place these bodies on where he would then exchange money. Now as you can see, it's not overly deep and we are stood directly above it. So I can only imagine that if the stories are true, then this would have been a lot deeper back in the day, and deep enough obviously for these little boats, or rafts I should say, to get down. So welcome to Canky Ginnel, a place many people say could well be haunted with the spirit of Owd Canky, and if not Owd Canky himself, but the spirits of those souls whose bodies he would desecrate. And even though this story of Owd Canky has over the years been passed down through the generations, we ask ourselves why that is. Why has this one story it's stuck with the people of Middleton for so many years? Why is that? Well, simply put, a lot of people think that the tale of Owd Canky does get retold is to stop children from visiting places such as St Leonard's Parish Church, such places as the Ginnel that we've taken you guys down, because, and it may sound wrong because it is a church, but places where it's secluded, such as at the beginning of Canky Ginnel, as you saw through the footage, they do look like they are being misused and mistreated, perhaps by people doing drugs, perhaps by the homeless. It's hard to say. So these tales of Owd Canky, some people believe that they are being passed down to younger children to stop them from coming to such places such as this on their own or in small groups late at night. They can be dangerous places. So obviously these tales and the spirit of Owd Canky or William Lancashire, they should be enough to frighten off children from visiting these places. Now, even though we're fully grown adults, myself and Vicky, and perhaps many of you guys watching our videos, as you can see from the litter and the rubbish that's just strewn about behind St Leonard's Church and just off the main road in Middleton, you've got an old ruin in front, but just look at the rubbish and the decay, and it's an absolute mess. And I won't swear like I did off camera, but even Vicky's just said, haven't you, Vicky, that even you yourself in certain places, even in broad daylight, you felt kind of intimidated and not safe. Now, again, like I said, we're grown adults. It's daytime. It's about 10:30 in the morning. Sun's out, but there is an intimidated fear or feeling just walking around.
When you're in the church area, no, it's here. Yeah.
It just doesn't feel right, does it? I won't say it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel right. Whether or not it's because of what you're seeing in front, what you saw at Canky Ginnel, whether or not it's the tale of Owd Canky that's in our heads, it's hard to say, but...
Oh, come on, it's not the tale.
It's not the tale. But it does feel like you're not welcome here. Now, me and Vicky, we've gone off tangent slightly with this story about Canky, but we feel it's important to document the things we do see on these trips and not just edit them out just in case it offends people. We're not here to offend anybody from Middleton or anything like that, but it's such a shame that you've got this beautiful church behind us with all the history and all the headstones and the strange tales such as Owd Canky, but then round its doorstep you've got all this rubbish, all this trash that's been left behind. You've got, I mean, graffiti doesn't bother me if it's done right, and the Ginnel didn't bother me, But everything about this side of Middleton just feels wrong. And again, whether or not it's part of the myth of Owd Canky, it's part of the mystique of Owd Canky and it adds to it, I don't know. But even if the story of Owd Canky isn't true, even if the stories of his spirits roaming this area isn't true, just to see the trash and the mess behind us and everything else about this side of Middleton, that's enough to frighten anybody from coming here in the first place.
But this is during the day. Can you imagine what it's like during the night?
Yeah, like Vic said, this is daytime. So anyway, we're going to get back on to the story of Owd Canky because I think we've gone off tangent here. But again, we don't want to edit these parts out because, like I said, we feel it is an important part of what we do. Now obviously, body snatching, grave digging to steal the lifeless bodies, obviously, it was an illegal activity. And I'm not sure of the dates, I'm not fully up on the story of, is it Burke and Hare, the famous grave robbers? But for sure, this kind of activity was illegal. And this is why Owd Canky would visit the freshly laid plots or the burials, and that's why he would do it under cover of darkness, because obviously there was less likelihood of him being seen. And from what I gather, I don't think he was ever caught doing it, because like I said, when they found his lifeless body in his lodgings or in his home, they found all these valuable possessions. I will presume that the possessions, like I said, may have been jewellery, would have been clothing, shoes, waistcoats, whatever. I don't think there would have been much money because obviously these were possessions taken from bodies digging from the graves. And I'll presume that any coins would have been removed before they were buried. But certainly, maybe cheap jewellery or items of clothing most certainly would have been found. So who was William Lancashire? And where did the name or the phrase Owd Canky come from? Now, very little is known of William, very little. But there was one newspaper article in one of the Middleton newspapers back in 1882 when William's body was found. And they would describe this character, like I said, as being a bit of a loner. He lived in squalor. But those people that knew William Lancashire, they would describe him as being somewhat unkempt in appearance, quite smelly because he never washed. His hygiene, his personal hygiene, was non-existent. And I think this is why the term and the phrase Owd Canky may have originated from. He was cantankerous. He would fall out with a lot of people. He never got on with people. He liked to be on his own. He wouldn't take no for an answer. And like I said, he would find it very difficult to socialise with other people. So I can understand in a way where the term canky came from. Cantankerous. You know, a bit sarcastic, a bit moody, a bit argumentative with other people. Now, the story of Owd Canky and the tales of grave robbing and carrying these cadavers down to the River Irk, again, it's one of these stories which many will argue and say there's no actual proof and evidence that any of this went on. And the tale of Owd Canky was born out of his body being discovered and the valuable items that were found in and around his premises. Some say some were buried in the chimney breast, other articles were buried behind patched up bits of walls. Some of these items were found in like iron pans, if you will, with the lid on, kettles. They're all over his place, but nobody could understand where he got them from. So this tale of body snatching and selling these bodies to unscrupulous businessmen on the River Irk, this is how it was born. and there is no actual evidence of poor William Lancashire ever doing these things. However, we know that body snatching, like I said, in the 1800s had become quite rife in certain areas. And I think it was the Burke and Hare, put the names down below, the most famous of the lot, I would presume. We also had an article, an old newspaper article that we uncovered about a year ago when we first looked into the story of Owd Canky. And it does tell the story of a wealthy businessman whose wife was sadly, well, she sadly passed away, and she was buried here at St Leonard's. And he had heard the tales of body snatching, and he was so worried that when his wife was laid to rest here, he would spend quite a few late evenings sat around where she was interred. And this was to prevent her body being taken from the actual place of interment. So we know that people were frightened of the family members and the loved ones being dug up and obviously sold for medical science. So perhaps there is an element of truth with the story of Owd Canky. Who knows? But I do not think there is any actual proof or evidence that William Lancashire himself did these things. Now, what you may have noticed throughout this video is the terrific, superb outlines, or skylines I should say, of the surrounding areas. And I don't know my geography, and I don't pretend to know, but you can see for miles on a day like today. The hills in the distance, the houses, the businesses, the old mills just in the distance over there. And St Leonard's is just behind us here on our, well, now on our right. So I suppose when Owd Canky was alive, and if it's true he lived just at the bottom of Back Lodge Street, he may well have seen funeral processions taking place, and he would have been sat or stood at his window with a cigarette in hand, watching everything that was going on with a keen eye. And then it was just a matter of waiting until the opportunity was right that evening to dig up that freshly laid corpse. But it is a fascinating story. Even if it's true or not, it's a fascinating tale, and you've got the actual surroundings, you've got the aesthetic look behind it all. And like I said, all this probably would have looked completely different over 100 years ago. That's granted, but I just think the story and everything about it and the location, it all makes for a fabulous, fabulous, somewhat spooky tale. That, my friends, is the end of today's story, the tale of William Lancashire, also known as Owd Canky. Now, if you've been brought up on this tale yourselves, if you're a resident of Middleton or you were once a resident of Middleton, please get in touch. Tell us your thoughts in the comment down below. Now, myself and Vicky, we've enjoyed this little outing today. We've enjoyed bringing you this tale of Owd Canky. Whether or not you believe it or not is up to your own personal choice. Like I said, there is no written evidence that William Lancashire himself was involved in any of these illegal activities. And I think, personally, perhaps because he was a bit of a loner, a bit cantankerous, didn't like to socialise with people, I think the tale of Owd Canky is just being told and retold and told, simply, like I said, to warn off younger children from visiting places such as where we are now in the back end of the actual graveyard, which can at times look a little bit intimidating. I think it's to warn young children away from danger, but it is a tale that stuck, and it's a tale that is kind of evolved, in my opinion, over the years. Now if you have heard the tale, like I said, comment down below and tell us your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, The Days of Horror. We've got a lot more coming. We've got a lot of live interviews coming, we've got a lot of live streams coming, and we've got many more interesting locations to come. But in the meantime, guys, as I always say, I want you to take care, look after yourselves. We'll be back soon with other tales from a dark but at times glorious past. And as I always say, stay safe, but always stay curious.